Folks, welcome back to the Bobby Bo Show. This game's going to show you why the Queen's Gambit is unbreakable. Even if you miss the win a few times, you're still going to find it eventually. So here's the moves it starts with: d4, d5, and after c4, they could accept the Gambit by taking the pawn, or they could play knight to f6. And this is already a good sign, because usually if they play knight to f6, then they don't really know what they're doing, because after I take this pawn, they could take back with the knight, and then I play e4, and I have two pawns in the center, very strong development lead. Or they could take back with their queen here, and the engine says +1 already, knight to c3, attacking the queen. Queen goes to a5, pinning the knight to the king. And I'm thinking about bishop to d2, because then I would be breaking the pin and getting ready to attack the queen. But I also think I could get this bishop activated first so that the queen can't go backwards. And I think I'll just play e3 here, and then I'll play bishop to d2 next. But knight to f3 also says knight to f3 is good. But now they play knight to e4. Oh no, attacking my knight twice. So I'm thinking about, how do I defend against this? I could go queen to c2, attacking the knight, and then they'd probably trade knights here. And I'm thinking about bishop to d2, then they take my bishop, and then they have the bishop pair. And everyone knows the bishop pair is slightly advantageous if you're a master, but we're not masters, guys. And it actually would have been even better just to play knight to f3, apparently, because after knight to f3, if they take, I take, and they can't take this, because bishop to d2, attacking the queen. Now I'm defending the rook. They're up a pawn. Queen goes back to c6. Now bishop to d3, and I'm almost completely developed. They were up a pawn. Okay, I'm about to castle, finish development. They've only moved their queen, taken a single pawn, but because I'm about to use all of my pieces, I'm gonna win that pawn back. So the engine says +1 so far, and this is how it should have gone, perhaps. After bishop to d2, they take my bishop, I take back, and now their only developed piece is their queen. They haven't moved any pawns yet, their pieces haven't moved, they haven't castled yet. I've already developed my knight, moved two pawns, my bishop's ready to come out, my knight's ready to come out, I'm ready to castle. So this is good for me. But I think a lot of players overvalue the bishop pair. They just moved their knight 3 times to take my bishop, and all I did is develop. They didn't get any advantage out of it, but I guess we'll see if the bishop pair is worth it. They play e6, getting their bishop out in a moment, and now I have to choose how I want to finish development here. And I'm thinking I could go knight to f3 like usual, or because they don't have their knight here, and they don't have any control of the center, I might just bring the pawns up, and if I want to push the f pawn, I don't want to block it with the knight. So I want to play knight to e2, but I don't want to block the bishop. So I got to move the bishop first, bishop to d3, and then I'll play knight to e2. But now they play queen to g5, attacking my pawn here, which would take my rook next. So what do? How do you defend against this? Well, you have a few options. What would you do? Well, maybe the most obvious is g3. So the pawns defend each other, and that's fine. But I don't really like that pawn structure. Why would I move this pawn up? Then I'm going to castle, and there's going to be a weakness around my king, and there's no bishop here. Maybe I could get the bishop here. I could actually play bishop to e4 and defend this pawn. That's also an option. But I did want to play this f pawn forward, and I want to move this knight here. So I might as well just play the f pawn now. And now I'm attacking the queen, and the queen can't take here because my queen defends the g2 pawn. So what do? Well, queen goes back to f6. And the evaluation continues to go up a little bit. And it might not look like they've made a bad move yet, but the evaluation keeps going up every time because they're not developing. They've only moved their queen. 1 pawn. I should be able to create a winning attack at this point if I was a master, but I'm not quite sure what to do yet. So I just keep improving the position, and I could bring the knight out, but I'm looking at this pawn here. This pawn's very weak. I want to attack it somehow, but just moving the knight's not very much of a threat. They can defend against it. So I decide first to play rook to c1, and now if I move the knight, I'll have 2 pieces attacking the pawn. So just setting up more possibilities for tactics later. And after bishop to b4, pinning my knight to the queen, I decide I don't really like that pin. And also after a3, if they take here, that would be very good for me. Let's just actually look at what happens if they take. Big blunder here, I take back, and the evaluation keeps going up here. We're targeting this pawn with 2 pieces now. Maybe knight to c6 to block it. But now I'm just going to finish development, and we'll see what happens. Knight to f3, they castle, and now what would you do here? And you're completely winning here if you attack the king. So g4. You could play g1 first, rook to g1, or king to f2, getting ready to bring the other rook over. But g4 is just the best move here, and you don't need to castle because the middle is completely closed up. Your king is safest here. What you need to do is start moving these pawns down, break open the king, get your rooks over here, and attack. And they cannot get the bishop over here. They can't get the knight over here. They can bring the knight back to here, but all of your pieces are ready to attack the king, and they're going to just have a queen and a knight. And they're so far behind in development that you're going to win something. So let's see, you're about to play g5 and attack the queen, so h6. Now rook to g1, getting in front of the king here, and you're about to break it open. Bishop to d7, desperately trying to finish development, but it's too late. G5 and the attack has started. Queen's under attack, h captures g5, take back with the rook, pinning the pawn to the king, defended by the pawn here, and you're about to double up the rooks. Let's say they continue development. Rook A to D8, bringing the rook to the middle. Now king F2, and you're about to double the rooks up. Knight to E7, trying to bring the knight over to defend, but it's too late. Rook C to G1, and they cannot stop the attack now, but they can try with G6. Okay, blocking with the pawn here, defended by the pawn, but it's not enough. Just knight to E5, attacking the pawn, and now all your pieces are hitting it. And what do? They have no options here. Absolutely no moves. Where would they even go? They can't move the knight that has to defend. The queen's defending. This rook can't get over here. This rook can't go over here. Let's just say, like, they move the pawn forward or something. You're just gonna take here. You win the queen. And now you have a queen and a bishop versus 2 rooks and a bishop, and you should be able to win this game here. So that's how it should go if they take the knight here. But they want to keep their bishop pair that they worked so hard for, so the bishop goes back to A5, but now B4, taking more space. Bishop has to go to B6. This bishop is almost trapped also, so maybe something like A4, A5 later. But first, let's finish developing. This knight has not moved yet. We haven't castled. Let's play knight to F3. I was thinking about knight to E2 earlier, but now that this pawn's already up, we can just play knight to here. And then the knight comes here. So changing my plan up based on the circumstances. And now they castle. And knight to G5 is crushing here, but I did not go for it. You could even play G4 here. And it's the same idea as before. You can just attack the king now and they cannot stop it. Same situation as before. Look, they haven't moved any of these pieces. This bishop is useless. The only thing defending their king is this queen. So you can just attack it now. Something like this. Your king is safe, but I was afraid that if I didn't castle, I would get into situations where my king is not safe, because it's hard to see what's going to happen once all the pieces start getting taken. And usually when I don't castle, it's a problem for me. I thought about the attack here, but I decided against it. I decided to play it a little bit safe because I feel like I have a good position and I don't really need to take big risks. I feel like something will appear eventually. So I castle. And we'll also look at knight to G5 here, hitting the H6 pawn with the bishop and the knight. And if they move the pawn forward, then we just fork. Well, they can't move the pawn forward. They play something like G6. Now H4, and the attack is happening. We're about to break open the king. And now if they play H6, well, you could just play G4 here. You don't have to worry about losing that knight. You're just going to go in and attack. Break open the H file here. Bring the queen over. Checkmate. You could do something like that probably. Engine loves this, but also just back knight to F3 and you're safe. Also, the best move here, completely winning still. And then something like queen to G7, G4. And once again, they just can't bring these pieces over. They just played the worst opening, did not develop, did not focus on getting piece activity, and all of my pieces are useful. But I did not make proper use of them. Castling though, a safe move, still says +2. And I gotta say, the position is a lot easier for me. Even if the engine says +2, it feels very winning. I just haven't found the right moves yet. And after H6, now I can once again play G4. Also maybe queen to F2, bring the queen to H6, but I couldn't quite figure out what to do here. And I figured this knight's not doing much, it's blocking my rook, and it could come over here to E4 and attack the queen and just be closer to the king side. Maybe come over to C5. So I'm thinking about knight to E4 here, attacking the queen, see what they do. And they go queen to E7, best move here. And finally, I think I was thinking about G4 here, but I was just too scared. But just G4 once again. But instead, A4, and I'm going for that A4, A5 idea. And if I play A5 right now, their bishop is trapped, nowhere to go, so I would win the bishop. And I'm not expecting them to miss this, but your opponents might. Instead, the idea here is just to move my pawns down the board, take more space. You can see I have all my pawns here in the middle, and I'm about to start moving into their territory and slowly taking more space, cramping them up. Making it even harder for them to finish developing. So they have to make room for the bishop here. They play C6. And now G4 here once again, still an option. Just saying, guys. A5 is good. Taking the bishop off of the king diagonal, making the bishop even worse. Basically reversing their development even more. I think even B5 here. And then if I have a pawn on this square, we take or something, then I'm just controlling all of this diagonal and this file here. So just very strong. They can't bring the knight to here. They maybe bring the knight to here, but then they can't go anywhere else after that. So that would just be good too. And knight to E5 also might be the best move here. Maybe because it blocks this pawn from coming forward, which is really keeping this bishop from activating. Also, then they can't move their F pawn or else I fork them. The knight to E5 probably best here, but I play knight to C5. And I think if they take, I'll just take with this pawn. And then I'll have my queen on an open file. I'll have this good space here. How are they going to develop, you know? I figured that would be pretty good. Now they play a5, and the engine is back down to about +1 here. So maybe my attack is getting worse because I'm not finding the right way to proceed here. But still probably an easier game for me with all the space that I have and all the piece development. They still haven't moved these 3 pieces. So what do I do here? Well, I don't want to take here because if they take with the bishop, attacking my queen, defended by the rook, also activates their pieces a little bit better. I'm not going for the capture there, even though it's probably okay. Engine says it's still the second best move or first best move. Knight to e5 again, also the best move. But I'm thinking about this bishop actually. And I like the diagonal that this bishop is on, but I don't like that it's blocking this queen. Because I am thinking about if they take, I take with the pawn and open up the file here. And I want to be able to put my rook behind my queen here and have checkmate threats with the bishop on the diagonal here. Maybe get like a back rank checkmate. So bishop to b1 here. And I think this improves my position a little bit. And also one thing about the bishop being back here on the b1 square is for some reason, a lot of people will miss this bishop and they'll forget about it. And that probably only applies to low ratings, but this is low ratings, 1600. So I think that adds a little bit of power to this bishop. And I also have the option of playing bishop to a2 here. If I ever want to put the bishop in line with the king, maybe target the e6 pawn. If they ever move this pawn forward, then this pawn becomes a target. So keep that in mind. But now A captures b4. And of course, I'm going to take back with the queen here. But now the rook is on an open file. And even though I have a bit of a space advantage, I don't have quite as much of an attack as I did before. But still have a pretty good position, so that could change fast if they make mistakes. But now they can trade bishop for knight here. And they do. Bishop captures knight. And if I take back with the rook, then knight to a6 and I get forked. And if I take with the queen, then they take my queen, I take back with the pawn, and then they take my pawn, activating their rook even more, and I'm in trouble. So the only way to keep the advantage here is to take with the d-pawn, and it seems like now the c5 pawn is going to be a target. And I'm expecting knight to a6, but first they play rook to d8. Good move here, controlling the open file, but I also want to control the open file. I'll play rook to d1. This rook wasn't doing anything before, it was my only piece not really doing anything. Now it's doing something. On the open file here, and there's tactics possible. And after knight to a6, I play queen to b6. And now look at the tactic that's possible here. There are threats on the board because this bishop is on the diagonal here. And if it was my turn, I would just take with the rook, checking the king. They take back with the queen, I take and checkmate. Or they block, I take the queen, and I'm winning. So there's threats here, and they could do rook to d5 here, defended by the pawns. And that's probably the best move here. But instead they decide to move this knight back to c7, and that's also a fine move. Doesn't get much worse, and the knight can now come to d5. But here I go for rook captures d8, and after the queen takes back, I want to play rook to d1, but that would lose a rook. So first I'm going to play bishop to c2, and this also defends the pawn here. Gets ready to play rook to d1, and I'm trying to control the open file here. The queen is restricted to defending the knight, so queen would have to go to something like e7 here. And then I'm going to play something like knight to e5, and I feel like I'm making progress here. And they decided just to go for queen to e7 already, getting the queen out of the way of the knight, breaking the pin on the knight, and also adding an attacker to the c5 pawn. And what do I do here? Well, I don't really know what to do, but I figured this knight's not really doing much. Probably just move it forward, and then it can do more later. So I go knight to e5. And if they play knight to d5 here, then it's a pretty even game. My queen's under attack. I have to go back to b3, defend the pawn, and they can finish development. Their king is safe, and they have no problems. But instead of knight to d5 here, they played rook to a6, attacking my queen. But my queen is not really doing anything on the b6 square anyway. This knight's not really in danger. They're going to be able to defend that just fine. And my queen's going to be more useful if I slide it back anyway. This move helps me out a little bit. And I have a few options. I can actually go to any of the b squares. Well, let's just look at each of them. b1, lining up the bishop and the queen on the king here. But a bishop check here doesn't really do much, I don't think. Maybe queen to b2. Putting the queen in line with the king a little bit. Also in line with the knight here, just a good diagonal. A lot more space here. Queen to b4, also a good move here. But I decided I like queen to b3 the best here. And this puts the queen on the pawn here. We're also attacking this pawn. If they move the f pawn, then this becomes a target eventually. And I can also come over to d3, take the open file if I need to. I like this. And now they go for knight to d5. And that's a good knight in the center of the board, defended by two pawns here. If I move this pawn, then they take this pawn. And it seems like a pretty good knight. But maybe you thought they could have taken this pawn, free pawn, right? But no, bishop to h7 check. King has to take, and then rook captures your queen, so that you can't take this pawn, but don't even try it. And now, what would you do here if you were me? And just like earlier, I'm looking at this bishop here, and I'm thinking about how the bishop is blocking my rook from defending this pawn. And right now, it's kind of setting a trap, but but I don't think they're going to fall for that, and I might want my rook to be able to defend this pawn later. And this bishop is not really any better on c2 than it is on b1. There's no use defending this pawn. My queen's defending the pawn here. So bishop back to b1 here. Once again, back to where it was earlier, but I do like it there. And now I can come to a2 again if I need to. And what do they do now? Well, rook to a5. And here they are, attacking my pawn twice. So good thing I have the rook here. And what do you do now? You have a few options to defend this pawn. You can't go here or here because the knight's defending. So you can go something like queen to c2, defending. Queen to c4, also defending. And I didn't see this at the time, but queen to c4 is also an option here, defending the pawns. And it may look like you're blundering the e3 pawn. Then you can play queen to c3, hitting the knight and the rook, and you're going to win material. So queen to c4 might have even been a good move. But I like my move a little bit more because it won the game, and that was queen to d3. All right, what does queen to d3 do? Maybe we're about to play e4 and make the knight move? Maybe do some sort of back rank checkmate or something? No, that's not it. Maybe I'm losing the pawn here? Maybe I'm losing the pawn here? What would you do if you were 1600 rated with 9 minutes on the clock? Well, hopefully you would play f5 here, stopping checkmate, best move in the position. And now that does create the weakness here, like I said earlier, maybe something like bishop to a2 later. But now I can play queen to d4, defending everything, and I'm good. Great position here, also lined up with the king. Maybe something like knight over here eventually. I don't know. This is just very good. This bishop is a pawn, can't come out. This is a great position for me. Let's see how it plays out. Bishop to d7, g4. Ooh, finally g4. We're attacking the king again. F captures g4, and then queen to e4. And look, we're about to checkmate again. Knight defends this square now. They go back knight to f6, hitting your queen here. And now queen to b4. Knight's no longer defending the square. You're hitting the rook and the pawn here. If they move the rook back to defend, you just play queen to b6. So let's say queen to d8 now, defending the rook. And I don't think taking the pawn here is the best move. Best move? Ooh, rook to d1. Attacking the bishop twice. Bishop pinned to the queen. They're losing material. They can't save everything. You're just attacking everything at the same time. That's how that would go. Possibly if they played f5 here and then played some pretty natural moves. But no. 9 minutes on the clock. 2 free pawns here. They take on c5. Attacking my rook. Oh, do we just trade rooks? No, checkmate. King to f8, only move. Queen h8, game over. And the Queen's Gambit really is unbeatable, guys. Such a good opening, so many winning chances, you just have to find them. And with the Queen's Gambit, you're eventually going to find the win. Just make some decent moves. You're always going to have a winning opening. Unless they play the Albin counter Gambit, then good luck. But that's all for today's episode of the Bobby Bo Show. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed, smash the like button. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day.